Well, hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Teaming Up for Community Conservation session. Conservation districts can team up with multiple partners to help restore and sustain our natural resources. In this session, the Kansas Association of Conservation Districts will share how partners come together to create the state's groundwater recharge sustainability project. The Lake County Conservation District in Montana will also share how it developed the Montana Pollinator Initiative through grant funding and partnerships across the state. And before we get started with our speakers, just a couple of quick housekeeping items for everyone. Our speakers are joining us live and they are able to answer questions through the Q&A chat box. So please type any questions you may have into that chat box and we'll be happy to answer your questions for you. Additionally, once the session wraps up, you'll go back to the agenda and you'll be able to select which session you'd like to go to next. And with that, I'd like to introduce our first two speakers. Bill Simshauser is a supervisor for the local Kearney County Conservation District. He is also the Kansas Association of Conservation District Executive Board member. Bill has been the supervisor for the Kearney County Conservation District for 28 years and executive director for the Kansas Association of Conservation Districts for 8 years. He has been a board member of NACD's board of director for 4 years. Bill lives in southwest Kansas, north of the small town of Lincoln, right in the heart of the Dust Bowl area. He farms and ranches approximately 5,000 acres of dry land and grows wheat, corn, and milo. And Bill is joined by Matt Smith, who works for the Playa Lake Joint Venture as the conservation delivery manager since 2019 and has spent the greater part of his 25-year career in translating USDA conservation programs and opportunities into wildlife habitat. He began his career with the Kansas Department of Wildlife, Parks, and Tourism as a biologist, where he worked directly with landowners on habitat projects for 23 years before starting working with PLJV. Matt is a native Kansan where he lives with his wife and their herd of 6 horses. And with that, I will turn the floor over to both of you.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this breakout session. I'm Bill Simshauser, and I'm representing the Kansas Association of Conservation Districts. And with me is Matt Smith, and he is representing Playa Lake's joint venture. First of all, I would like to give you an outline of where this is going today. And we're going to start out with the water in Kansas. We're going to show you the precipitation across the state of Kansas, the sources of water within Kansas, and then the major water uses for the water in Kansas. Second, we'll be talking about Playa Lakes, what they are, how they function, and their importance to the Ogallala Aquifer. Third, we'll be talking about partnerships and with conservation districts and bringing together partners to form a RCPP, which is a regional conservation partnership program. And then finally, we'll be talking about the conservation itself and the programs that the RCPP will be implementing. So first, I'd like to set the text for this presentation by providing you kind of a picture of the waters across Kansas. So with this slide, you can see that the southwest corner of Kansas receives 45 inches plus of precipitation per year. And as you move from east to west across the state, you can see that that precipitation drops off dramatically. And so that the western tier of counties receives less than 20 inches of precipitation per year. Now, the red star you see there is over Greeley and Wichita County, and that is the project area for this RCPP. And the blue squiggly lines, I guess if you want to call it, that is the boundary for the Ogallala Aquifer. This slide represents the sources of water for the state of Kansas. So as you can see, the eastern third of Kansas, the source of water is surface water. Now, the surface water comes from your federal reservoirs, state reservoirs and lakes, your municipal lakes, private ponds, streams, and rivers. And then as you move from east to west, you can see that that source transitions to groundwater. and that groundwater is from the Ogallala Aquifer. Now, the average reported use of water, again, let's start in the eastern part of the state. You can see the eastern third, the majority of the water is used for municipal practices. And as we transition again to the west, you can see that 85% of the water that is used in the western third of the state is used for irrigation. And so you can see with the limited amount of rainfall, and if it wasn't for the Ogallala Aquifer, the economy of the western third of the state would be severely impacted. This slide represents the percent change in the saturated thickness of the Ogallala Aquifer, or in other words, the percentage that the aquifer has been depleted. So as you look at this slide, the darker brown areas represent the most depletion so far. So the darkest brown is over 60% depleted already. And as it moves lighter, we even have some areas in blue that are actually increasing, but the majority of the aquifer is decreasing. And according to the Kansas Geological Survey, in 50 years, the Ogallala Aquifer will be 70% depleted if the water use remains the same over that next 50-year period. Now, the yellow circle that you see there in the western part of the state, again, that is the project area for this RCPP that we'll be talking about. And some farmsteads within that area are already depleted of water and have been abandoned, or the residents are hauling water in just to survive. Now, Playa Lakes plays a major role for the Ogallala Aquifer. And so I'm going to turn it over to Matt, and he can explain to you what the Playa Lakes are, how they function, and their importance to the Ogallala Aquifer. Matt?
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, this section is just kind of a little course on playas. There's a lot of people maybe not know what playas really are, or have ever heard of it before. So we thought we'd give a little context on about playas and some of their history and how they function and how they fit into this whole project that we're working on here today. So this is just kind of a little refresher course on playa wetlands. And so to look at the area that encompasses the Ogallala Aquifer, playas pretty much overlay that whole area. The green line there is our boundary for our joint venture, is where we work within that area. So Playa Lakes are very much very important to us working in this whole 6-state area where these playas occur. There are roughly about 72,000 playas within this region, and that totals about almost 580,000 acres of playa wetlands within this area. They're typically very small, they're shallow, they're drier more often than they are wet. They are fed entirely by rainfall and runoff from those rain events. They're a closed basin type of a wetland. The only surface water really to be found on the high plains in this part of the world. And underlying each one of those playas is a hydrate clay floor that supports the water and also helps support the infiltration when those playas do fill up with water. So to bring it to Kansas a little more, there are about 22,000 playas in the western part of the state. They're pretty small. Most of the playas in Kansas average about 3.7 acres. Some of them could be hundreds of acres, but most of them are pretty small in the landscape. And the vast majority of them are in cropland use and not in native rangeland. And they show up pretty well on a map and aerial photography when they're wet. But not so much when they're dry, especially ones that are being farmed. It's very easy not to even see them at all in those areas. This picture is a playa that's right next to the town of Leote, which we'll be talking about in this presentation. This was one that was recently put into a CRP program, and so the grass was recently planted. So you can tell a little bit on the vegetation where the wet area is and that basin is, and then the area around that is going to be a buffer consisting of native grass surrounding that playa. But that's what they look like when they're dry, which is much more common than when they're wet. And so, like I'm saying, they're mostly small areas. They're the lowest point in the closed watershed. The land cover that's around playas really helps determine their health and how they function. You know, if it's in a cropland setting, there's going to be potentially sediment that flows into playas. If it's in a rangeland setting, that probably will not be the case. And that really helps determine how they function. If there's terraces, if there's roads or things like that, that impact the playas within that watershed. And they are the primary source of recharge for the Ogallala Aquifer. 10 to 1,000 times greater amount of recharge under playas than there are outside of playas in more in the uplands. And that water going through those playas is generally a higher quality than going through other pathways into the aquifer. So this is just a good diagram of what they look like, cross section. We talked about the clay layer at the bottom of the playas. It's a very common feature that all playas have. When clay dries up, it tends to start to crack and have some fissures in it. And those fissures is where the water initially runs through and down into the aquifer eventually as it goes through the soil profile. It can also pass through along plant roots that are formed in those playa basins. And once those fissures start to swell due to the water being present, the water would start to flow on the edge of the playas and then reach the aquifer through that pathway as well. So the impacts to playas, generally the ones that are being farmed, like I said, sediment is one of the largest impacts that helps to decrease the function of playas. Certainly pits or ditches or terraces or berms and things like that surrounding playas that divert water into the playa is going to affect how it functions. And roads and road construction, things like that certainly impact playas as well. Playas that are impacted by sediment, basically what that does is a couple of things that impacts the functioning. Number one, it decreases the capacity of that playa. When it starts to fill up with sediment, it doesn't hold near the water for the length of time that normally would, or it also increases the surface area, which would increase the evaporation of that water in the playa when you start to have sediment fill in the playa depth. And it also starts to impact some of the functioning of the clay layer in the playa, where those cracks may fill up with that sediment and it would impact the water flowing through those areas. So sediment is one of the biggest impacts to playas that we have to deal with. And it's a big part of the restoration of playas, goes into removing that sediment to try to restore their functions and get them working like they should again. And so what a healthy restored playa looks like and is, the definition of one, it has an intact basin where the water is allowed to flow into that playa. The excess sediment, if there is any in the playa, has been removed down to the original clay layer, if we can determine that. It doesn't have any pits or trenches or roads or other kind of modifications that might impact the hydrology flowing into the playa. It has a native grass buffer that's there to help trap sediments and nutrients and other pollutants before they enter the playa. And it goes through its natural wet and dry cycle. And it's very much a healthy playa is appreciated and managed by the owner for what it is and for the services that it provides. So some of those ecosystem services, goods and services, we talked about water quality and the importance of those buffers around playas to trap the sediments and nutrients from entering playas. Of course, the quantity with the recharge is a very important part of playas. Some of the larger playas that are near towns, they can actually help with floodwater storage and retention that may be flowing within those towns or near those cities that have large playas by them. They can store a tremendous amount of surface water. Certainly, they store carbon through the plants in the playa itself and through the plant, grass buffer to help store carbon in the organic matter that's formed in the playa basin. They can be very much a biodiversity hotspot on the high plains, not only for waterfowl and birds, and playas support over 185 species of birds within that region. There's over 450 species of plants that supported in playas. Many amphibians and mammals also are supported in part of their livestock within playas themselves. So they're very much a biodiversity hotspot on high plains. And they can provide a great source of recreation when playas are wet and the waterfowl is migrating through. They can provide a great opportunity for hunting, wildlife viewing, and other aspects of enjoying wildlife that might use those playas. And so we want to be we try to be really careful on what we say about recharge in Playas, because that is really a big part of not only this project, but in Playa conservation in general. And it's an important aspect of what makes Playas relevant to people, and that is the recharge to the aquifer. And as Bill laid out, the declining aquifer is a very big issue for a lot of people in several states. And so we wanted to be very careful what we say about recharge. So we got together a lot of scientists that study these things, study recharge, and hydrologists, geologists. We got them all in a room and we locked the door so they couldn't leave until they told us what we could say about Playas. And at the end of the day, what they said, we can say with some assurance is that Playas are a major source of recharge to the aquifer, but they cannot make up for what's being removed by irrigation. The amount of recharge through the number of Playas cannot make up for what is actually being withdrawn. That number is much higher than what could be recharged, but it can be enough water recharged through Playas to support rain-fed systems, through grazing operations, through municipalities, small towns. It can be enough recharge to make up that water use. And we can say that if you conserve a playa on your land, that water is yours, but it's going down in the aquifer that you may be using with your house or a domestic well or a stock well or something like that. That water is yours. And it does improve the water quality. We can say that. And what we say also on average, and this is what some of the scientists have told us, on average, it's about 3 inches per year going down toward the aquifer. And that takes a lot of time to do that. It may be generations before it actually reaches the aquifer. So we say water falling today is probably going to be used by your grandchildren in the future. But this is all about the future, is what this project is about. And so this moves us into the next part of this presentation, and it starts to talk about partnerships and through different organizations that have come together, not only in this project, but we'll also highlight something that really got started in another state. And this is in New Mexico. And actually this slide is from New Mexico and some of the partners down there talking about Playas in that part of the world. And what really highlighted this issue there was an article in National Geographic back in 2016. And we talked about the same issues that we've talked about already, where the city of Clovis, New Mexico is facing the same issues that we are in Kansas. And many of the farmsteads and families that have houses in that area have already run out of water, and they're bringing water in just for daily needs. And so the city of Clovis developed a water conservation plan that included the restoration of Playa lakes. So that's kind of how at least the joint venture got involved with some of the activities going on in Clovis, New Mexico. And we also got involved with the Conservation District. And since this is a Conservation District National Meeting, we wanted to give a shout out to the Conservation District. They're serving Curry County, the Central Curry Soil and Water Conservation District. And they have been involved with water conservation projects for a lot of years. They started a partnership with the Playa Lakes Joint Venture to help deliver playa conservation in that region. And they have future plans to do an RCPP project themselves in that area. And they're looking at some of the readiness and environmental protection integration program there at the Air Force Base, Canada Air Force Base near Clovis as well. So we wanted to give a good shout out to that conservation district. It's doing some great things down in that area as well. And so part of the idea that the city of Clovis came up with and the community members there was about recharge of playas within their area of recharge for the city itself. And they understood some of the geology in that area where the water generally flowed from the northwest down to the southeast toward the city of Clovis and the Air Force Base. And they've identified the number of playas that they needed to recharge and what that might mean for their water sustainability needs. You know, playas are only a part of that plan. There's other aspects of that conservation plan as well, but playas are definitely a big part of that plan that the city put together. And so the conservation districts and other partners and the joint venture all got together and have been working on that through grants and some other funding mechanisms to start restoring many of those playas that are in that area. And some of these are pretty big playas, so those are some pretty neat projects down there in that part of the world. And so we got to looking at that, the whole model there really of the Playa restoration in terms of water sustainability for towns. And we looked across the whole region and we looked at cities that are sitting on a declining saturated thickness of the aquifer. And we looked at cities that had a high playa density next to those cities, very similar to what was going on in Clovis. And we came up with 56 other towns that are in that same situation, that had a high playa density and a low saturated thickness of the aquifer in that region. And so we picked Kansas to reach out to many towns, some of those towns, and just start to have a conversation about playas and water conservation and sustainability for those towns. And that led us to starting to talk with the city of Leote and starting some conservations there about playa conservation. And the city and members of that community and folks like Bill really got engaged with that conversation. And that led us to the next part of this presentation and started to talk about what conservation activities were the result of those conversations. So I will turn it back over to Bill.
Okay, thank you, Matt. So as Matt alluded to, in August of 2018, the Playa Lakes joint venture began promoting the CLOVIS model within Kansas. And they initially introduced it to 5 towns within the western part of the state. And Wichita County and the city of Leota seemed to show the most interest. And after just one meeting in Leota, the town has begun a community conversation resulting in a proposed RCP project that also included the county of Greeley County and the city of Tribune. So again, in 2018, Playa Lakes joint venture, along with the Wichita County Conservation District and the Farm Service Agency, began to hold monthly meetings to try to introduce programs to restore Playa Lakes within the area. Now, the NRCS already had Playa Lake restoration programs that helped landowners restore the playas and put for recharge for the overall aquifer. But Playa Lakes joint venture and the Conservation District didn't think that landowners and producers were taking advantage of those programs to the extent necessary to improve the water situation. Now, this could be from lack of education, lack of information, or just plain lack of complacence among the landowners and producers. So as these meetings continued, the conversation turned more and more to how could we as a group maintain a clean and sustainable water supply for the communities of Wichita and Greeley counties and for the cities of Leota and Tribune. And so the idea was proposed to enter into a RCPP with the NRCS. And after much conversation with the NRCS, a plan of action was formulated to put together and submit a proposal to the NRCS. But first, we needed a name. So GRASP, Groundwater Recharge and Sustainability Project, was proposed and was adopted. Second, we needed some goals and potential outcome for the RCPP. Those goals were to help create a sustainable, clean water supply for the communities of Wichita and Greeley counties with a focus on the towns of Leota and Tribune and the farmsteads within the area. And then also we needed to maintain a viable economy within the communities and to provide habitat for a shrinking wildlife population within the area. Third, we needed programs and practices to help achieve those goals. And these include practices to help reduce irrigation or even non-irrigation around the municipal and domestic wells within the area, and to restore Playa Lakes within a close proximity to the municipal and domestic wells. And then we had to be able to substantiate the progress of the RCPP as it progressed. And fourth, we needed partners that could contribute financially and or with in-kind donations as matching funds with the NRCS. Now, this is where Conservation District played a critical role, because not only did they host monthly meetings, but they made most all the contacts with potential partners and set up meetings with them to inform them of the project and ask for their support. Then it will be the conservation districts that take the applications for practices and conduct and contact the appropriate agency or organization for assistance with the landowner and the producers. And so there was a diverse group of partners that came together. And in total, these partners will contribute $1.5 billion or in-kind contributions to the project, and the NRCS will contribute $1.4 million for a total of $2.9 million. Now, if you bear with me, I'm going to read off the list of partners that came together because it's a very diverse group and there's quite a few, and I'm afraid if I don't read them off, I'll miss some. So here we go. We have Wichita County Conservation District, the Greeley County Conservation District, the Kansas Association of Conservation Districts, Playa Lakes Joint Venture, Ducks Unlimited, the Kansas Department of Wildlife Parks and Tourism, the Kansas Department of Agriculture, the Kansas Water Office, the Kansas Alliance for Wetlands and Streams, Kansas Association, Livestock Association, the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, Pheasants Forever, the City of Leota, Wichita County Commission, the Wichita County Health Center, the Leota-Wichita County FFA Chapter, the Wichita County Conservation Area, Unified Greeley County, the Greeley County Economic Development, and the Groundwater Management District number 1. As you can see, this is a very diverse group of partners that probably would not ever came together if it hadn't been for the conservation districts contacting them and inviting them to the table. So with that, it was Matt Smith, along with the Playa Lakes Joint Venture and the Kansas Association of Conservation Districts, that developed the RCPP proposal that was submitted to the NRCS. And so now I'll turn it back over to Matt, and he can describe to you how the RCPP proposal came together. So Matt.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, it came together with basically with the leadership of Bill kind of steering this whole effort. So I want to say that it took someone to really bring everybody together and keep things moving. And Bill certainly did that through this whole planning process, which actually took almost a year. So it always takes someone to be a champion, and Bill has been a great champion for this whole project. So like Bill was saying, you know, that it was a real diverse group of partners that came together. And when you're talking about, you know, when you're relevant to people's problems and issues, you know, then people start to come to the table and start bringing things that are meaningful. And what was really neat to see in this project, even though it hasn't got on the ground yet, but just in this stage where everyone is committed to the project, what everybody brought to it, you know, the conservation districts with their ability to do outreach and coordination and help with some funding on projects, and bringing all that together to the project. The local communities are very much engaged and committed. County commissioners have committed in-kind work through some of their road crews and things like that to help do some of the restoration on some of the playas. The Department of Ag, Kansas Department of Ag, brought some of their funding for well retirements, which are a part of this. And the local units of government, the cities are very much engaged with outreach and help with some limited funding. Ducks Unlimited, which certainly is interested in wetlands and waterfowl habitat, brought some engineering design and technical assistance capacity, on the ground capacity to this project. Of course, the joint venture, we bring in, you know, a lot of outreach abilities and capacity and some evaluation and coordination for the whole project. Wildlife and Parks certainly brings wildlife monitoring, which is something they're good at, to the project, and some of their habitat funding to the project itself. And of course, the biggest partner in this whole thing is the producers that are very much invested in the community and want to see this project a success. So everybody brought something different to the table, and it really what made the project work was this diverse partnership. And I can't speak at a conservation district or place where there's probably NRCS folks watching this without getting into NRCS speak. So I added a slide about some of the practices that some folks will recognize very, very well that are going to be a part of this project. And as Bill said, this is not just about playa restoration. It's about irrigation management. It's about shutting off wells. It's about conservation crop rotation, tillage management. It's about all those things. And that's why there's a kind of a big list of practices here that are going to be a part of that RCPP. It's not just the wetland restoration, but it's these other practices as well that all add up to water savings, which is the goal, and recharge of the aquifer, which is the goal of the project. And so some of our priority areas that we're going to try to target through the project, and this is just in one county, playas that are within 2 miles of municipal and stock wells are going to be a target, with playas within 1 mile of domestic wells. And when you start to look at those numbers, it adds up to about almost 1,400 acres of playas that need work. And that's about 585 playas. So you can do the math. Those are pretty small playas, but they do need restoration and work and sediment removed and buffers planted. And that is the plan to do just that. And so we wanted to add a little something here. The joint venture and part of their outreach efforts on not just this project, but in playas in general. We did some interviews with a series of landowners from that area, from Western Kansas. And if this works, we would like to show you one of those. One said it's better than the producers themselves. So we wanted to try to show this little video. It's only a few minutes long, but it's very good.
I farm about 2,800 acres. Used to be a lot of irrigation. I used to have 14 irrigation wells at one time. Now I'm down to 4 active wells. I see water as the main issue of survival of Leota. The water keeps, our local economy going, our feedlot and our hog facilities. They're the main employers of Leota and Wichita County. We lose them, then we'll lose maybe our hospitals and schools. We have to preserve our water or there won't be future generations out here. Be 3 or 4 families, 3 or 4 groups farm the whole county. There's no water to even drink. I'm on the steering committee for a water conservation area for Wichita County. We're voluntarily reducing our water usage 29% for the first 7 years, and then we're going to eventually get to 50% over 17 years. The Playa program come in now, and it's another great way to prolong our water table. Playas will definitely play a role in extending the aquifer, I think. I have the one big one out there, and that playa is 17 acres. It's a pretty good sized one. When I farmed it, I didn't see the benefits until I start attending some meetings, and they stressed the recharge of the aquifer. For the town of Leota, there's an area, to the northwest that Kansas Geological Survey people say this is the area where the recharge needs to take place to have the most effect. And my playa is in this area. Every little bit would help Leota. I think Leota is going to have some issues in the future, water issues. Well, they already have. Some of the city wells are 6 and 7 miles north of town to get enough water for Leota. And if we could just keep, the local ones, keep them pumping something, that'd help. That's the main goal of all, the WCA and these other groups to prolong our water, to keep us on the land and keep the economy going. I feel like the playas, if for the recharge value are worth a bunch. I don't know how much they're going to help our recharge, but it sure can't hurt anything. And if you get that full of water out there, that's a lot of acre feet of water, and we could get 60, 70% of that into the aquifer, that would be great.
So that really brings us to the end of the presentation, and I'll turn it back over to Bill just for some final thoughts.
Okay. Well, it's because of the persistence and fortitude of the conservation districts, along with the many partners, has developed this RCPP. And this shows the vital role that conservation districts play in the managing of our natural resources and the importance of their role in the communities. And even if this RCP proposal had been rejected by the NRCS, it is still a win for everyone in that the meetings brought to light the importance of the Ogallala Aquifer and the importance of conserving and managing the water within the aquifer. And not only did it bring the landowners and producers together, but it also brought the communities together as well. And so with that, if you have any questions for Matt or myself, we'll stay on for questions. And we thank you.
Well, thank you, Bill and Matt, for that very insightful presentation. It was great hearing from both of you today. And with that, we'll pivot to learn more about the Montana Pollinator Initiative. And we have 3 speakers joining us today. Heidi Fleury has been with the is the conservation coordinator at the Lake County Conservation District since 2016. Before coming to Lake County, she worked seasonally for 10 years around the Western United States for both the U.S. Forest Service and the Natural Resources Conservation Service, and then jumped ship to conservation districts where she could have more fun. Well, Heidi, I agree. I think we are a lot of fun on the conservation district side. Next, we have Samantha Tappenbeck, who is the Conservation Program Manager for the Flathead Conservation District. Her background is in ecology and freshwater science, and she has previously experienced working for the Montana Association of Conservation Districts. And rounding out the trio is Sarah Bowman, who is the Natural Resource Specialist for the Gallatin Conservation District. She earned her BS in Water Resources from the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point in 2014 and her Master's in Environmental Science from Green Mountain College in 2019. She hails from Wisconsin and has been living in Montana since 2016, where she joined the Big Sky Watershed Corps that placed her at the Flathead Conservation District for 1 year. She worked in watershed restoration planning for 4 years before joining the Gallatin Conservation District in 2020 and has authored 3 watershed restoration plans for watersheds in northwestern Montana. And with that, I will turn the floor over to our presenters.
Well, thanks you all for joining us today. We're really excited to talk to you guys about our efforts to team up for community conservation and improve pollinator habitat in the state of Montana. My name is Samantha Tappenbeck. I'm with the Flathead Conservation District, and I am presenting along 2 others from Montana Conservation Districts, and they will introduce themselves now.
My name is Sarah. I'm the Natural Resource Specialist with the Gallatin Conservation District.
And my name is Heidi Fleury, and I am the Conservation Coordinator with the Lake County Conservation District, and I'm going to start us off. So we're going to talk about community pollinator conservation today, but what I like to do before I give any presentation about pollinators is to just describe the words that we're going to be talking about a lot that maybe you don't fully understand. So when I say pollinator, I mean any bird, bee, bat, moth, fly, or butterfly that's moving pollen from flower to flower, helping flowers reproduce. When I talk about pollinator habitat, I'm talking about flowers, grasses, little areas where there are ponds, kind of anywhere that the bees and butterflies would be foraging for pollen or nectar. So those are 2 words that I feel like I get a lot of questions about. So pollinator and pollinator habitat. Now to kind of start, I am in Lake County, and I don't have a great definition of exactly where that's at, but you see on the left-hand side of your screen, that green area, that big lake in the middle, that's Flathead Lake, and my conservation district is just south of that. So I'm over here in the northwest corner of Montana, and the folks that are going to be talking, Sam's up here in the northwest, and then Sarah's in a different area, and she'll let you know where that is. So in Montana, there are 58 conservation districts, and we're grouped into different areas. And then in each of the areas, there are approximately 10 conservation districts, and all of the Montana conservation districts are funded by a mill levy on real property taxes. So we don't get any additional state funding. We don't get a lot of extra funding. And our conservation districts rank from getting $4,000 a year in mill levy funds to about $400,000 a year in mill levy funds. And so that kind of shows you that we have a small amount of money to do a lot of work. And we're going to talk about all the work that we've put into this pollinator initiative so far. So today, I specifically want to share some of the success that we've had in the pollinator initiative. And that started here in 2016 in Lake County. I'm also going to share some of our passion for the project. And then we're going to talk about the future of pollinator conservation here in Montana and then nationally. And I just want to say ahead of time that we're going to present a lot of information quickly. So if at any time you need to call us or email us, all of our contact information will be at the end of this presentation. And this slide specifically is talking about our partnerships. And we would not have been nearly as successful if we didn't have the strong partnerships that we do with both state agencies, local agencies, and our local NRCS office. And I want to just describe in this picture, I'm not going to point out exactly who is who, but you have a Lake County Conservation District Supervisor. You have Lake County staff in this picture. There's also an NACD partner position, as well as our NRCS district conservationist. And we have an AmeriCorps member down there. And we in Montana have a program called the Big Sky Watershed Corps, and that is an AmeriCorps program. So we have volunteers that come in and help us with a lot of the outreach and education that we do at our conservation district. Because like I was mentioning, a lot of us aren't very well funded, and I'm the only employee. So we partnered with so many different people, including statewide organizations, both the Soil and Water Conservation Districts of Montana for funding, as well as the Montana Association of Conservation Districts. And they help us with lobbying the legislature. So we have worked with people around the state, like I mentioned, to make this a success. And this whole program started in 2016. And that picture is of Susan Gardner, and she's a supervisor at the Lake County Conservation District. She's been a supervisor for about 20 years now, and she is very into our farming and ranching community, and she has spent a lot of time throughout her work here at the Conservation District talking with people about pollinators. And in 2016, she finally decided that she wanted to have a resolution. And that resolution is a statewide resolution. So we wrote it in 2016, and then at our annual convention in November, the statewide association adopted it. And that 2016 resolution specifically stresses an importance of conservation districts talking about pollinators and agriculture to the general public. Also, that resolution was written to help us form a united front for lobbying the Montana legislature for additional project funding, which is something we were successful with this resolution. And then the final thing is just to think up new ideas for pollinator projects throughout the state. Since there weren't really any going on, we were able to start with a clean slate. And this is kind of our first idea for a pollinator project. And it really took off, and we've been able to share it around the state. And that's what Sam and Sarah will go into a little bit later on. So specifically, the Lake County Pollinator Initiative focuses on a couple of things. We give free flower seed out for areas up to 50 by 50 feet, which is about 2,500 square feet. So we give out large and small amounts of free wildflower seed. We also have cost share programs for larger producers and ranchers to help them incorporate more flowering plants into their landscapes. We have a technical assistance program that we go out and we meet with landowners and we help them figure out the best ways to prep their site. Because if you get involved in any sort of pollinator habitat work, site prep is always going to be the most important thing to talk with folks about. So we do a lot of technical assistance, and kind of in this picture on the left here, that's me. And I'm meeting with a landowner and her name is Vicki McLean. And we put that pollinator plot in 3 years ago. So that was one that was done in 2017. And then this is monitoring it in 2020. And it's just really amazing. And it's really fun to go back out there and talk with landowners about it and give them that monitoring assistance and help them identify those plants. So the last thing that we do with our pollinator initiative is we have youth and adult outreach programs throughout the year. We hold a conservation speaker series in the winter that specifically focuses on targeting adults. So we hold it at breweries or we hold it wherever we want, where people can usually have a beer in hand. And we talk about different issues, including pollinator habitat conservation. And then we have youth outreach programs, and those range from going into the schools to having different days and hosting them and volunteering at different events like a Huckleberry Festival. And we have a lot of different things where we're getting out there and we're talking to the community, because that's a big part of our initiative. So I'm going to just give you our overall stats since 2016 for our pollinator initiative here in Lake County. We've helped 407 people plant almost 730 acres of diverse mixes of flowering plants and grasses. We've also hosted over 40 pollinator education events, and the people who have come to those have ranged from 10 people in an event to 200. And so throughout the time since 2016, we've talked to over 2,500 people specifically about pollinators and pollinator habitat conservation. And those photos at the bottom are just a couple of our events. We had a Bees and Blooms workshop on a Saturday that was well attended. We've gone into schools and painted little bee houses with kids, and that's that middle picture. And then we also have an outreach tool that's really neat, and it's Pollinator Jeopardy. And the questions are really basic, so they can reach anyone from a second grader to a 70-year-old. But you're much more likely to have kids interact with you on that. Adults are scared. So that 730 acres, I'm going to break that down a little bit for you. 17 and a half of that 730 acres, this is seed that we've given away to landowners that have small plots, like we said, ranging from maybe 10 by 10 to as big as 50 by 50. So we've given out 17 and a half acres to 388 different people. And so even though the plots might be small, so are the people who are using them, right? Bees and butterflies, they're not super huge. So any amount of flowering plants we can put out there on the landscape will help. So we've given out 17 and a half acres for our pollinator plants. And these are just a couple of pictures from our plots flowering throughout the summer and the fall. So that's kind of our smaller scale. When we go on to our large scale pollinator habitat projects, you can see that there's about 630 acres that we've contracted with 13 different farmers and ranchers to put cover crops on since 2017. And our cost share consists of a 50% cost share of the seed. And then we have an extra caveat that you have to have at least 3 different flowering species. And so a lot of these farmers and ranchers have started grazing cover crops in our area. So they're going to be putting these in anyway, but having that additional kind of add of the flowering species has just really upped our level of habitat we've been able to put in our county. And then something that's really important in Lake County, we have a lot of pastures. We have both irrigated pastures and dryland pastures. And kind of the scene here is that these pastures have been in production, being grazed for the last 100 years. And a lot of times the species composition isn't that great. So you maybe have a monoculture of smooth brome. So we're working to interseed different legumes into these pastures to look for the most cost-effective, easiest way to get more flowering species in. And we had a 40-acre trial, and we worked with 5 different landowners on these different acreages. And so this trial has been in for 5 years, and we monitored it each year. And then after the 5 years was up, we put out a publication. So that's something else that we do with all of our pollinator outreach and our pollinator habitat projects. We have the project, we monitor it, so we get some good data on it. And then we share the data for both which species are working best and the best methods to plant them in different publications that we have on our website. And then we also share them with the general public. So this irrigated pasture interseeding was really neat, and a lot of success was had. And so not only do we have irrigated pasture, but we have dryland pasture as well. And dryland pasture is especially difficult to start new plants in Lake County. And it's also difficult to keep it from not just becoming a weed field. And so this dryland forage improvement study has been in the ground for 3 years. And every year it just keeps looking better. And the general idea of this, what you're looking at here are some pictures of our pollinator strips. So it's a 40-acre plot. This is just one landowner who has 40 acres. And throughout, there are different trials of 6 or 7 different grasses that might work best in a dryland setting. And then after those blocks of grasses, there's a row of pollinator species. And so a lot of times pollinator plants need different management than grass species do. And so this is a really neat example of how you can incorporate pollinator habitat into a field that maybe would just normally be a monoculture of grasses that you would be grazing. And so all of these plants, all these flowering plants are also, they could be grazed if they needed to be. They're not detrimental to livestock. So this large scale habitat project has been really neat. And then finally, kind of at the end of 2019 to the beginning of 2020, everybody started contacting me asking about our program and asking about how they could get involved. And I had mentioned that we had used that resolution for the conservation districts to be able to lobby our state legislature for project funding. And in 2019, we were successful in getting the legislature to earmark $50,000 for conservation districts to put pollinator projects on the ground. And so that $50,000, we got that just about a year ago, and we've been trying to figure out how to spend it. And the first way we started was starting an Area 5 Pollinator Initiative. And I had mentioned that there are 58 districts and we're in 6 different areas. And Area 5 is the area that I live in. And so we started there because it was obviously easiest for me to do it there. So we had both a training to go over how to start your own initiative. And then I also ordered 1 acre of seed for 7 different conservation districts in our area to try out so they could start their own pollinator initiative and start giving away seed. And then luckily, after the Area 5 training, everybody was interested. And so we got some more funding from this Pollinator pollinator pot of money for me to travel around the state. So there are 6 areas, and I've been to 5 to give my training so far. And I've talked to over 30 conservation districts and partner organizations. And I mentioned that there are 58 conservation districts, and there's pretty much just 1 employee per district, except for the larger districts. And so I've talked to so many people throughout the state, and all of them are so excited that we are just really happy that everyone in Montana is taking this on. And now Sam is going to go on and tell you a little bit more about how they've taken this ball and run with it.
Thanks, Heidi. So at Flathead Conservation District, we were really excited to roll out this program in Flathead County. We attended one of the statewide pollinator trainings that Heidi put on, and thanks to the experience and success that Lake County Conservation District had with their program and the templates and resources that they developed and rolled out to the state, it was really easy to bring it here to Flathead County. So Flathead County is also located in Area 5 up in the northwest corner of the state. On that map in front of you at the top of your screen, you can see that dark green blob. That's Flathead County. And we share a border with Canada. We've got a lot of forested land. We've got a lot of high country, but there's also a lot of glacially carved wide valleys and river bottoms, and a landscape that's really similar to the one down in Lake County, which is immediately to our south. So we received an acre's worth of seed mix from the Lake County Conservation District to develop our own pollinator initiative. And it is a mix of species that you can see here on the screen on the table in green. And that mix provides flowers that are different sizes, different heights, different colors and shapes to attract a variety of Montana's native pollinators. And then it's also a mix of species that have different bloom times and life cycles so that we assure pollinators have a food source all season long. And so we began doing some outreach for the Flathead Pollinator Initiative in Flathead County. And that initial outreach was us going out to community events, and we had table setups and played the Pollinator Jeopardy game. And we also organized some outreach events. We planned to host a film tour in Northwest Montana and show the pollinators film and have a hopefully lively Q&A discussion around that. We also scheduled some workshops about pollination or pollinators, and that was part of a larger workshop series that's offered by the Flathead Conservation District. We developed brochures and we had stickers to hand out and all kinds of fun outreach stuff to do. But then in March of 2020, COVID-19 hit the US, and it presented several complications for us. So our office, like many Conservation District offices, closed to the public. We were not certain at that time how COVID-19 was spread, and so we weren't able to do in-person site visits for a while with people who were interested in the program. It was just questionable to do so, and then we ended up delaying and derailing a lot of our outreach plans. We had to cancel the Pollinators film tour, and then we also had no in-person student classes, and so we canceled our in-person summer workshop series. So we had to pivot in some ways. And so for the Flathead Pollinator Initiative, we created a web page, and on that website we had information about the program. We had a form where you could fill out some really basic information and hit submit and indicate that you were interested in participating in the program. And we also embedded a story map about the Flathead Pollinator Initiative, and I'll get into that a little bit more later. But basically, you know, these virtual resources were designed to kind of streamline the process during a strange time and make it easy to sign up, but also make clear the requirements to participate and provide some resources to those who are interested. So we provide a number of resources through this program. both to program participants and to anyone who's interested in improving pollinator habitat. So we offer site visits where we can provide some technical assistance to folks that are interested in developing more pollinator habitat, help them select a location for a pollinator plot, discuss site preparation and maintenance needs, and then have an opportunity to discuss what expectations there are when developing pollinator habitat. So we also offer a pollinator planting guide, and that was a template that was provided by Lake County Conservation District in their kit. And we modified it for use with the Flathead Pollinator Initiative, but it's essentially a step-by-step guide to preparing your site, sowing your seed, and then maintaining your site over time. So we offer that, and then we also offer a do-it-yourself pollinator gardens workbook. And this is something that we originally developed for use with our workshop series, our in-person workshop series, but we provide it as a resource now through this program. And it gives you some background on the basics of Montana pollinators, what they require in terms of habitat, forage, overwintering sites, and nesting sites. And then it gives you also a template for laying out your pollinator garden and designing it to meet your land use goals. So we had to cancel that in-person workshop series, but we reconfigured it to be a webinar series that we hosted live on a virtual platform. So we offered a couple of pollinator related webinars as part of that series. They were a do-it-yourself pollinator habitat webinar and a fall planting for pollinators webinar. And the live webinar series was really well attended. We advertised it on social media and in our local paper and on our website. And we had really great question and answer and periods, and all of that was recorded. And so then we posted that webinar series on our YouTube channel. And so now it's, it's great to have as a resource for anyone who's interested in referencing that information and using that for additional outreach in the future. And, I think it's not ideal. I think you get more engagement when you meet with people in person, face to face, but this was a good, it was a good way to pivot in a difficult situation. So we're happy to make those available on our YouTube channel. So then we also offer seed to program participants, and we provide the same amount of seed, up to 2,500 square feet worth of seed per participant. And we encourage participants to start small because, people have big aspirations. They want to put in a lot of pollinator habitat on their property, and that's so great. But it's also a lot of work to do the site preparation and the maintenance over time. So we require that they prepare the site, and they must remove the existing vegetation, get a clean, weed-free seed bed. And then once they've prepared the site, we provide them with their seed, and they put it down on the ground, and they are off and running with their pollinator plot. So through this program, a really important aspect for us is engaging with participants. It's not just handing out seed and then, never touching base again. We want to engage with the program participants. We want to make it fun. We want to make it an opportunity for them to connect with others and tell a story about what they're doing on their property. So we provide some resources to help with that. We offer participants yard signs that they can monument in their pollinator garden or their pollinator plot. And that yard sign has some information about what's going on at that site. And then there's a QR code where anyone with a smartphone can scan and go directly to the Flathead Pollinator Initiative webpage and sign up if they're interested in participating as well. We hand out stickers to the landowners. They like to stick them on their water bottles and stuff. We also provide them with a do-it-yourself monitoring guide. So it's just a really simplified visual guide so that program participants can go out anytime into their pollinator garden and they can take their checklist and just do a visual qualitative assessment of whether or not the species are present or not present. And so we encourage participants to submit that information, to send us photos, tag us in photos, share any experiences that they've had. And we try to incorporate as much of that information as we can into the story map, which is embedded on the website. So the story map documents the locations of all of our pollinator plots in Flathead County. It has photos, it has some information about the program statistics so far, and an opportunity to sign up if you're interested as well. So, you know, all of those tools are essentially just a way to help program participants get engaged and feel like they're part of a larger effort, which I think, you know, stimulates more involvement and motivation to join the program. So since we rolled out the program in 2020, we handed out seed to establish 19 plots over the spring and fall of this past year. That amounted to 28,700 square feet worth of seed. That's about half a football field size. So we're starting small, especially compared to the big progress that Lake County Conservation District has made so far, but we're excited about it. So the Conservation District staff, we go out and monitor the plots a little bit more rigorously. We set a goal to monitor a certain number of plots per year, and then we shoot to monitor in the late spring and early fall. And so the graph you see on the screen is some data from our monitoring of the spring 2020 plots that were established. And so this graph shows the relative abundance of each species across those spring 2020 plots. So the number of pollinator plots is shown across the bottom of the graph. So it's not that many, just 8 plots. But the abundance of each species is shown as a color. So pink, there was none. Blue, there was pretty poor representation of that species. Green, there was good abundance, and yellow, there was excellent abundance. So if you look down the left side of the graph, you can see each one of those species, and as you look across, you can compare how well they did across the plots. So you can see that the native sunflower did very well across pollinator plots and showed up quite a bit, while the wild bergamot didn't really show up much at all. And we would expect these kinds of differences. These data are from just a single monitoring event. It's a snapshot in time, but the mix is by design diverse. And so some of the species establish quickly. They're meant to outcompete the weeds, while others take a little more time to establish, and you'll see them in later seasons. And then, of course, local conditions at each site influence whether or not a certain species does well there. So we have some photos of our spring 2020 plots, and you can see that a lot of these are in residential areas, tight neighborhoods. They're various shapes and sizes, and you can see one of our yard signs down at the bottom center of the screen. So the Flathead Conservation District also has an outdoor education center and demonstration garden on our property. And it's got an outdoor learning classroom, which is great for hosting workshops. And it's got a number of exhibits that demonstrate various conservation practices like cover crops and windbreaks, rain gardens. And then we have 2 pollinator plots. And we are located in a pretty urbanized area. So we're surrounded by pavement and strip malls, and we're right near a pretty major highway. And despite that, we saw a really incredible number and diversity of pollinators and beneficial insects in our pollinator plots, which I have some photos of to show you. So it's really fun to just go out, bee watching. So the Flathead Conservation District hopes to expand on this program in the coming years. So we hope to diversify the seed mixes that we offer. Fortunately, Lake County Conservation District has done a lot of the legwork to work out various species mixes for different landscapes and habitat types. So we hope to expand on that. And we hope to also offer resources for seeding larger acreages. We got a lot of interest in that in Flathead County. And so we want to work with Lake County Conservation District using a similar model to scale up that program and be able to offer larger acreage seeding options. And we would like to develop a cover crop for pollinators program. So we'll work with some of the resources that Lake County Conservation District partnered with to develop their seed mixes, and also hope to work with our local farmers co-op to develop a seed mix that works well for the local producers here in Flathead County. And we hope to develop a spring mix and a fall mix so that they can feed it into their crops. We hope to also develop a citizen science project. So I think we have a really unique opportunity to engage our program participants to do a little bit more monitoring and be able to learn more about the native pollinators in Montana, which we actually know very much about. So we're looking into providing participants in the Pollinator Initiative with the tools and training to be able to participate in more like nationwide standardized protocols, like the Xerces Society Bumblebee Watch and the Monarch Larvae Monitoring Project. And I think it's just one more way to engage program participants, have them spread the word, and then feel like they're contributing meaningfully to these data sets. We also hope to expand on our outreach efforts. We are very eager to meet in person again, revamp that workshop series, go out into the classrooms and get involved with students and adult education opportunities. And so we're just really excited to offer this program and to see the Pollinator Initiative expand to other parts of Montana and roll out statewide. So with that, I will turn it over to Sarah Bowman with Gallatin Conservation District.
All right, thanks, Sam. So again, I'm Sarah Bowman and I'm with the Gallatin Conservation District. So thanks to the statewide workshops by Lake County Conservation District and the examples set by the Area 5 pollinator programs, Gallatin Conservation District decided to expand the Pollinator Initiative into southwestern Montana. So southwestern Montana is a new area, and we are actually the purple area on the state map you can see in front of you, and Gallatin Conservation District is sort of in the south central part, pretty long county. So due to the varying capacities of conservation districts throughout Montana, our goal with expanding this project was to not only start our own program in Gallatin County, but to also be able to provide resources necessary for other conservation districts in Area 6 to also start their own pollinator initiatives. We decided that collaboration between the conservation districts would be the most effective way to streamline the process for a lot of them who wouldn't have the capacity to start programs on their own. We were able to apply for a pollinator grant, which is managed by the Montana Department of Natural Resources and Conservation. This is actually the same $50,000 pollinator funding that was made available in 2019, thanks to the statewide pollinator conservation resolution of 2016. So we were able to receive a little over $8,000 to expand the Pollinator Initiative to southwestern Montana conservation districts. Thanks to this funding and also to the templates and resources available through Lake County Conservation District, 8 of the 10 Area 6 conservation districts participated in the expansion of this program to increase pollinator habitat in southwest Montana. Another motivation for Gallatin Conservation District to spearhead this project is because of our commitment to natural resources education. We have an education and outreach center as well that was built in 2014, and the photos on the slide right now show how this looks. This space is located just outside of our offices and serves as an outdoor education space for our educational programs, and is open to the community as an interpretive educational space. It includes raised beds, which you can see on the right-hand corner, where we grow a number of crops that are open to community to harvest, and it also includes a number of demonstration gardens, including a pollinator garden, a xeriscape garden, among other things. So through this program, we're really eager to add more pollinator species to our gardens that we already have, and just expand the number of native plants to showcase beneficial pollinator habitat. So one of the big things that we had to change for southwestern Montana was the actual seed mixes that we created. The climate of southwestern Montana is a lot more drier than northwestern Montana, so we had to customize these to be more drought tolerant. We worked very closely with local NRCS staff. They took the seed mix that was created initially by Lake County Conservation District, and they removed and added plants that were really a better fit for southwestern Montana climates. We also opted to create 2 mixes instead of just 1. So on the bottom of the screen, you can see our native pollinator mix. This, of course, includes primarily native plants to southwestern Montana that create beneficial native habitat. But we also decided to create a conservation pollinator mix, which is the mix on the top of the screen. And this includes primarily plants that are not native southwestern Montana, but they grow well in our climate without becoming noxious and still provide beneficial pollinator habitat. This mix in particular should do well where noxious weeds are present, since these species are better suited to compete with those weeds. This mix will also do well for our larger field plots where weed maintenance may be more difficult for the landowner if noxious weeds are a concern. And lastly, the species of the native mix are actually a lot more expensive than the species that we have included in our conservation pollinator mix. So because we created these 2 mixes, we were able to provide a lot more acreage of pollinator seed. Both of these mixes, of course, include flowers of multiple colors, different bloom times, and are drought tolerant. And this ensures beneficial pollinator habitat lasts throughout the seasons, no matter which mix you get. So before we could actually provide pollinator seed to Area 6 conservation districts, we had to physically make the mixes ourselves. We purchased all of the supplies and mixed acre-size seed bags to distribute to the conservation districts. NRCS staff helped us out with this by suggesting seeding rates that gave us a weight of each seed per acre needed to create even cover. We created the mixes ourselves because we had to purchase seed from 2 local seed farms. But in the future, we would probably have 1 seed farm create the mix for us, and then we could add in the few other species needed to just avoid human error in weighing and mixing. Each conservation district then received at least 1 acre of each seed mix, and we distributed these seed mix bags in early September of 2020. And along with those seed mixes, we also distributed packaging supplies and stickers. So as you can see in the left-hand corner there, we have the number of different pollinator stickers, and you've seen this logo a few times throughout our presentation. And this logo was actually designed by someone who used to work for our statewide Montana Conservation Districts Association. And all we had to do now, because we have these designs, is just change the conservation district name, and it creates a really continuous logo for conservation districts throughout the state. And then in the bottom left-hand corner, you can see the different size packaging materials that we also provided to conservation districts so that they could have the opportunity to package the mixes in smaller sizes, larger sizes, whatever suits their needs. In addition to these physical supplies of the seed mixes and packaging, we also provided a lot of the informational and sign-up materials for conservation districts for them just to customize to their own counties. This included like a cooperator interest form, a planting guide, a DIY landowner monitoring sheets, and seed mix lists. And these were shared with the districts virtually. So these, of course, look very similar to the materials of Lake County and Flathead conservation districts, and it's all thanks to the templates that were created by Heidi originally. This made our job even easier because all we had to do was change out photos and titles and a few bits of information, and it was very quickly customized to Southwest Montana. After working with each of the Area 6 conservation districts this summer to get the resources needed, we were then able to officially start up our Pollinator Initiative program in Gallatin County as of September of 2020. Of course, due to difficulties from COVID, we focused our initial outreach on our website, our social media, local newspapers, and word of mouth. All of our program information and sign-up sheets are available online. And once we had a number of people signed up for our program, we held an outdoor seed pickup event where we set a table out in our education and outreach center and had folks stop by between a dedicated time slot to more safely distribute the physical seed mixes and to answer any lingering questions. The resources we have available to landowners are, of course, very similar to that of Area 5 conservation districts. We provide the free seed mix for small plots up to 2,500 square feet. And we've been able to conduct a few site visits as well to help landowners decide where plots should go and how to prep their sites. So far, the majority of our education and planting guidance has occurred on a site-by-site basis, where the landowners tell us what their conditions are, and we work better together to figure out a site preparation plan and to decide which mix would be best suited for their properties. We even were able to take advantage of the Flathead webinar series, especially their webinar about fall planting. So those are really useful for us just to share with the folks who are already interested and signed up in our program. So in order to further engage our participants, we will also be asking for landowner self-monitoring using the same DIY monitoring sheets created by Lake County Conservation District. We've also created some additional educational signage that will go in both our education and outreach center and also in public plots throughout the county. We're also keeping everyone's emails in a MailChimp database, and we'll send out periodic check-ins requesting updates. This is also a good way to share information and tips directly with our participants. Since we just started our program in fall of 2020, we don't have any actively growing plots yet, but we do have a number of plots that have been prepped and planted already, as you can see from the photos up on the screen. The current plots vary in size and site conditions, so we're really looking forward to next year to see how these plots start to grow and how they turn out. So far, as of September 2020, we've distributed seed mixes to 25 separate landowners for a total of 0.7 acres of pollinator seed. Other Area 6 conservation districts have also only just started promoting their programs. A few of these conservation districts have been able to distribute seed already, while others will be starting to promote their programs more this coming year. Overall, we've heard from many of our conservation districts that the interest among each county's communities is really high. So we're hoping that with increased opportunities for outreach events and workshops moving into 2021, we'll be able to get even more seed on the ground. So in conclusion, we have a lot of expanding to do yet for our program. We have a lot of goals for outreach, which includes heading to local farmers markets and other community events, sharing on our social media and other social media groups, attending meetings for HOAs and beekeepers and garden clubs. We're also hoping to show the pollinators film here in Gallatin County as well. As far as other educational programs, we'd really like to try to do a few of our own webinars, similar to Flathead Conservation District. And once we're able to have more in-person meetings, we'd love to try and have some hands-on site preparation and planting workshops, and also do some more youth and adult education events. Down in the right-hand corner, you can see resources from our Montana Pollinator Education Project, which is basically a folder of educational resources that we are able to provide to educators throughout the entire state of just information of how to teach about pollinators. So we're hoping that we can, with this information and also with our program, kind of promote those together. And then as far as monitoring, again, we're hoping to take advantage of the DIY monitoring sheets by landowners. And we'd love to see how seed mixes are growing, are certain site conditions affecting them, and then also what species of pollinators are attracted. We're hoping to be able to utilize a Montana Conservation Corps intern this summer to help us more in-depth monitor some sites. And we also might be able to use some of this information for the local college, the Montana State University. They might be interested in some of this information. In the future too, we'll continue to help Area 6 conservation districts as needed, providing materials, educational ideas, extra seed is needed as well. And as we continue to monitor, we may need to diversify pollinator mixes as needed. So with that, I'll hand it back over to Heidi to wrap up our discussion on the future of pollinator conservation in Montana.
Well, I just want to thank everybody for listening to our presentation today. And I think every time I hear people talk about this pollinator initiative spreading throughout the state, I am always amazed that this really did just start with a couple of our board members who were concerned both with honeybee conservation as well as with native bee conservation. Sam had mentioned that in Montana, we have a lot of pollinators and we have a big diversity, but we haven't identified them all yet. And so there are these large gaps, and conservation districts are going to try and help fill some of those gaps with information. And right now, specifically, something that is on our radar is the listing of the western bumblebee. And it's a proposed listing, so nothing has happened yet, but they're in that information gathering stage. And this is another way conservation districts throughout the country can help get involved in these things. We're going to be working with local partners, both at the tribe, at the local college, at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, to help monitor different long-term plots to see if we can see any of those western bumblebees. So we are working to help native bees as well as honeybees, because both are equally as important. And then we're going to continue to share our resources with conservation districts. Like you heard, Flathead and Gallatin have started their programs, but we have probably 20 other people who are interested in starting their programs in the spring of 2021. And then finally, we're going to continue to solicit funding for new programs for conservation districts throughout the state so we can continue to help with habitat projects. Because right now, the top 3 threats to bees and pollinators are habitat loss, disease, and kind of improper pesticide use. And so habitat loss is something that at the conservation districts, we feel like we can really help with. And I think this presentation has shown ways that you can help put more pollinator habitat into your community. And finally, you'll see our contact information here. And I did mention that we gave a lot of information really quickly. And I just want to let you all know that you can call me anytime, you can email us. We have a ton of resources on our website, and Sam and Sarah do as well. We're on Facebook, and we're also on Instagram. And so if you guys want to follow us and just see what we're up to here in Montana, and then get a hold of us with any questions. We really appreciate your interest in this topic, and we hope to see you soon.
Well, thank you to our presenters. That was absolutely fantastic. I know I definitely learned a lot. And then just the last housekeeping item is just remember to go back to the agenda, and you'll be able to see the next sessions that you'd like to go to from there. Thanks, everyone.